Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. All right, first question. You've said when you first started your keto recomp that you probably don't recommend it for cutting. Is this still true? If so, would you recommend an ultra-high protein diet instead? Yeah, even if you go low carb, you need to run an ultra-high protein diet when cutting. And I'm not talking about the layman. I'm not talking about the person who doesn't train, even though they would benefit from this too. Talking about people who lift weights. Why? We want to preserve muscle tissue. Now, if you're a novice lifter, you want to build muscle tissue while you're in a weight loss phase. All right? You want to be losing scale weight and be gaining muscle. The only way to do that's on a really high protein diet. And the problem with oftentimes the traditional medical keto is that it is 70 to 80% fat. All right? See the problem there? You're going to lose body fat on that. Well, what's the data show? The data shows that increasing protein intake preserves muscle tissue better. Furthermore, there's a lot going on with nutrient partitioning and protein. In fact, protein overfeeding doesn't even cause fat gain. So let's say if a person's on a 2,000 calorie diet, and it's restricted. I've got my calculator going. You might hear me clicking it. And it's 25% protein. Right, that's only 500 grams of protein. It's 125 grams of protein, and that's assuming you're cutting on 2,000. All right, 125 grams of protein for someone who's lifting and has any sort of base even started is not enough protein to hold on to lean tissue in a caloric deficit. Right, and that's even on 2,000 calories. All right, that's just simply not going to cut it. You need to have a higher protein diet. In fact, I would argue that knocking down as much protein as you can without interfering with your micronutrient intake, so make sure you're getting plenty of vegetables and stuff like that in, is really the way to go. As much protein as you can tolerate. In fact, the higher you jack your protein up, usually the higher your total calories can be while still technically maintaining a deficit. So yeah, much higher than 25%. You know, I would say probably a minimum, even if you wanted to do ultra low carbs and you keep the fat fairly elevated, minimum 50% your calories coming from protein. And in any sort of cutting phase where you're actively trying to lose scale weight, interject that protein way up. And that's what the data shows. You can still be in ketosis while doing that, by the way. For people who lift and train, actual 50% protein diet is still ketosis. As long as there's enough dietary fat and carbs are low enough, you'll still be in a state of ketosis. Just not the medical ketogenic diet. Not a deep keto diet. All right, next question. What is your strength goals for the end of the year? Squat, deadlift, bench, press, and standing press. I don't have specific strength goals, and here's why. My goal is to stay under 220 and to recomposition and to get as strong as I possibly can. So here's the question I would ask. What number do we put on that? We don't. We can't put a number on that. And because I'm doing something different than I've historically done, and I have my training dialed in a certain way, I've got my diet pretty well dialed in for doing this, and the recomp is happening, and I am seeing strength on a variety of lifts, I can't predict my strength. So I'm not setting goals. I'm not setting goals with it other than I want to get as strong as I can, and I want to see continual progress. Furthermore, because of the system of training that I'm doing, my goal is to get strong at everything. I want to get strong at different chain angles and tensions on the bench, squat, deadlift. I want to get strong at deficit deadlifts. I want to get strong at all my assistance movements. I want to get strong at the floor press. I want to get strong at the football bar press. I want to get strong across the board. All right, I want my deficit sumo deadlift to be high. I want my conventional deficit deadlift to be high. I want everything to keep getting stronger. I don't want any weak links. So it's not even in terms of the squat, bench, and deadlift. It's more of in terms of getting all around strong. And that's what I've tried to express repeatedly with what I'm doing with my training, is that people need to remember strong is strong, fast is fast. If you do stuff that increases your general pressing, pulling, and squatting strength, your lifts will go up, or your potential for them will go up. You might not have the technique dialed in perfect. You can go back and train that technique. And that's what the point of all this is. That's what the point of all this is that I want to be strong at a wide variety of lifts. I want to be strong at every angle. I want to find all my weaknesses. So that's the goal for the year. My goal is not specific lifts. My goal is to find everything that I'm the weakest at, the angles I'm the weakest at, and build those strengths up. I want to chip away at all the weaknesses. I want to get all around as strong as possible. And that's a big part of the system I'm doing. And that translates over to the squat, bench, and deadlift. Even though I might be doing a lot of variations of them, it still carries over because, number one, size equals strength, and there's enough carryover and movement pattern that those things still go up. So the goal is to get strong at everything. And how can I tell you what those end goals are going to be? We'll see when we get there. And the other thing to remember is that if I pick specific numbers, I might self-limit myself. And if I go too high, I'm going to be disappointed. So what I'm doing is assessing each week as it comes, tracking all my PRs, tracking my lifts, assessing my weak points. Every time I see a weak point, I'm more concerned with fixing a weak point than I am with where's that lift going to be at the end of the year. Because here's what I'll tell you. As long as I focus on getting stronger at everything, and I focus on getting as strong as possible at every weak link that I find, then I will get stronger. I'll get stronger. Especially if I make sure that I'm actively looking for every weakness and shoring that weakness up. All right? So it doesn't matter. The goal is to get stronger. And then the next year to do the same thing. All right, that's the plan. All right, next question and last question of the week. Instead of isolation exercises, is it ideal to do extra compound sets, like, for example, doing 3 more sets of overhead pressing rather than lateral raises and skull crushers? Well, it depends on if they're working everything you need to work. Can overhead presses equal the amount of side delt involvement you might get from a lateral raise? Maybe not. Maybe not. Furthermore, how much overhead pressing can you do before it creates additional axial loading and fatigue issues? Let's take a look at it and understand why we pick certain smaller movements. We pick smaller movements because we can't handle more volume of a big movement, right? We can only handle so many sets of bench press and overhead press every week. And we might find that the maximum amount of training volume that we can reach on those big lifts before we start running into system-wide recovery issues or overuse injuries in certain areas still might not be at our maximum recoverable volume for some of the smaller muscles involved. It may or may not be at our minimum volume to see growth. But even if it is, if we still have localized recovery left there, that is potential for more growth there. What I wouldn't really recommend people do is someone to say, okay, this big exercise works all 3 of these muscles. I'm going to work all 3 of them separately. Well, that doesn't always make sense. Because you probably can't find a big exercise that does that. But we get into certain things like the side delt. We may not fully activate all the muscle fibers and exhaust them with a big movement, at least one that's safe on the shoulders. Not saying it's not getting stimulation, it is. Same thing, we might be looking at the triceps and realize there is additional workload we can get. In fact, triceps are one of those that is very hard to get maximum stimulation through all the tricep off of big movements without running into overall fatigue issues, maybe beating our shoulders up too much. Now, will I say that we should do as much of it as possible with them? Yes. This is where things like specialty bars and all that stuff come in handy, and I'm going to talk about that more and more. The more specialty bars that you have and angles that you have available to work, the more big exercises you can do without risking overuse and systematic issues. Because you're changing the angles enough that you cut that stuff down. Doesn't mean you still won't benefit from filling in the weak links with smaller movements. You just won't need as many of them. because we're not going to have as many overuse injuries because we're rotating through enough variations. Right? We're rotating through enough that we can make these problems go away. Essentially, specialty bars allow you to train with more total volume on big exercises. That's what they do. That's a big part of what they do because of the different angles involved. But for people with limited equipment, they're going to need more small exercises in general. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.